My name is Robert Whitby-Smith. I'm a partner at Albion VC, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Costas, CEO of PSE. Good morning, Costas. To spare Costas's blushes, Costas grew PSE from a startup to over £20 million of revenue, the majority of which was recurring license revenue from over 60 Fortune 500 clients, and an organization with over 160 employees, including among the best and brightest in the field of chemical engineering and software, with operations in 3 continents and dominant market positions in multiple sectors. PSE achieved one of the largest exits of a UK software company last year, delivering a value that equated to an incredible 60 times total capital invested. Costas now runs PSE as part of Siemens, and the purpose of today's call is to share some of Costas's experience with other academics considering embarking on a startup journey. We start with the transition from academia to startup. In 1997, Costas, you were a professor in chemical engineering at Imperial College. What led you and your co-founders to take the risk to set up a startup to commercialize your invention?
One of the many good things about the chemical engineering department at Imperial is that we always had very close relationships with industry. So we already had a taste of the satisfaction, the kick, if you wish, that you can get by seeing the results of your research being applied in practice. But we also began to understand the limits of what could be achieved by doing projects based on industrial case studies, or even by licensing your technology to third parties, hoping that they would somehow commercialize it successfully. So in the end, we decided to have a go at it ourselves.
What were the challenges of switching from an academic environment to a commercial one? And what did you do to help yourself adapt?
Well, it is indeed a very big switch. I mean, one day you're a respected academic with people listening, or at least being polite enough to listen, to pretend to listen approvingly to your every great idea and opinion. The next day you find yourself being challenged intensely at every step of the way. Does your idea really work? In what way is it better than what you have or what somebody else is offering? And even if it does work and it's better than anything else, is it worth the extra effort, the extra money that will need to be spent to adopt it? And just when you think you have won all the arguments, something sometimes else, over which you have no control happens and derails the whole thing. So it can all be very draining psychologically and also physically, given all the effort you have to put in. So I'm not sure it's so much a question of adapting to all this. It's more being convinced about the value of what you're offering, and that if you can somehow persevere through all of these, you will eventually get there.
Fantastic, thank you. And what, in your view, are the 3 key things you have to get right to build a company from startup to £20 million revenue?
I think the first thing you need to have is a product. Okay, I mean, having a great idea supported by countless academic publications, widely cited and so on, is not enough. You need to focus on getting something that actually works, that can be demonstrated to potential clients, that can be applied to solve their problems right now, even if it's not perfect. And then, of course, you have to listen to your clients and improve your product further. So the product is paramount. If you really do not have an identifiable product, you are not going to get anywhere, in my opinion. The second aspect is the people. We spoke already at length about the people. Capability and motivation are paramount. And it's your job to select people who have them and to help them grow their capability, and it's your job to maintain their motivation. And finally, finance, getting more down to earth. The money, you need to bridge the gap between having this great idea and generating revenue from it. It does not necessarily have to be a lot of money and you certainly have to use it judiciously. The key thing to avoid is throwing money at things where you don't fully understand what you're trying to achieve, or you are not convinced that you understand the risks that you're taking. So product, people, and finance would be the 3 aspects I would choose, among many, of course.
So moving on to people and building a team, what were the critical hires in the early days?
Well, we were fortunate enough to bring some extremely talented technical people from all over the world, right from the start of the company. Obviously, having an academic network was very useful in this context. And of course, given our background, getting good technical people was the relatively easy bit. Finding people in other areas proves much more challenging for us. A key hire in this context was finding an outstanding, as it turned out, finance director, someone who was willing and able to understand the complex market in which you operate, the complexity of our product, and then help us secure the wherewithal to build a business.
Brilliant. What have you learned about how to hire well?
Of course, you're always looking for three things in any hire: capability, motivation, and experience. But if you can't find all three, go for capability and motivation would be my advice. If they're clever and committed, they will quickly gain the experience. And the management's job, your job, is to keep the ship steady in the meantime.
What can founders do to keep the culture as you scale from, say, 0 to 50 and then up to 150 employees?
It's a very good question, this one. And people join startups mainly because of the intellectual challenge and the sense of achievement in doing something completely new, not so much for the job security and the career prospect. So the culture of the company is all important, and you, the academic founder, you're the person who needs to maintain and cultivate it. You need to be there providing thought leadership. You need to continue getting your hands dirty with the technical challenges that will inevitably turn up the moment your great ideas make contact with the real world. You need to lead from the front, and don't expect anybody else to do it for you.
Fantastic. Moving on to some key learnings from strategy. What was the vision you set out to achieve at the beginning, and how did you adapt it over time?
Maybe I can start by saying that our target market is the process industries, from upstream oil and gas to chemical petrochemicals to specialty chemicals and all the way to consumer goods, food and beverage, pharmaceuticals, and so on. Our vision from the start was to provide the tools, mostly software, that would allow you to capture all available knowledge in the form of increasingly detailed, accurate mathematical models, and then to use these models to deliver value at all stages of the process lifecycle, from early stage R&D to engineering, design, and operations. I don't think this vision actually changed much since then. Having said that, I don't think we had any inkling back then how ambitious and difficult it would be to come anywhere near realizing this vision, and even more to convince industry to adopt it.
Indeed. How do you manage building product that customers demand and product that is scalable and fits the company's vision? So that balance between what customers are after and what is scalable for the company.
So when we formed PSE back in 1997, we thought we already had a great product. In fact, pretty much from day one, we had users, paid licenses in 5 big corporations around the world. So what more evidence could one ask for? Sadly, it didn't take us very long to realize that going from these 5 or 6 early adopters to a wider market was going to be a lot more difficult. We learned that having a great general purpose tool that could, in principle, be applied to anything from oil and gas to pharmaceuticals and so on, wasn't actually enough. Its value had to be demonstrated in each sector and even on each potential customer's applications. So we found that if you're pushing a new risky technology, your potential client may not be willing to meet you halfway or even 3/4 of the way. You have to go 99% of the way towards them. So what does it mean in practical terms? I mean, what we did anyway is we found that doing consulting projects with relatively friendly initial customers was key in this respect. We use these projects to understand our customers' business, their drivers, their priorities, and also to see how our technology could add value to them. And then we aim to generalize the experience and the learnings from these projects to develop a set of products sitting on top of our main general purpose platform to address specific sectors of the process industry. And this really was central to our ability to expand the business.
One common challenge is how to expand internationally, in particular into the US. How did you go about expanding into new geographical markets, and what lessons learnt would you pass on?
I'm sure there are many different ways to do this, both in the US and later in other areas like Korea, the Middle East. We followed a rather cautious approach. We started by securing 1 or 2 initial customers who are willing to work with us despite the geographical distance. This is easier said than done, I should say, especially when there are language or cultural barriers. You need to leverage your network of perhaps agents to get some initial contacts. But in any case, once we did have a few customers, we proceeded to establish a small local presence and then gradually grow it. Again, finding people who you can trust to lead these local operations is paramount, and I'm not sure there's a general recipe for doing this.
Thank you. Another common challenge that horizontal technologies like PSE has, a platform that can be applied to many sectors and end markets. It's how did you go about selecting sectors to focus on? Did you throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall and see what stuck, or did you start off with a tight, limited number of sectors to focus on?
It's a fine balance. On one hand, given your limited resources, it's obvious that you need to focus. On the other hand, especially in the beginning, you often don't know what to focus on, to be realistic. Pragmatically, you will probably start with the areas and sectors you know most about, but you need to be curious. You need to talk to people. You need to keep an eye out for opportunities elsewhere. You just need to learn as much as possible without overcommitting resources before you know what you're getting into. Theory aside, we sure did a lot of spaghetti throwing at the wall in the early days. Now, one of my favorites, so to speak, from those days was looking at freezing of turkeys in baths of liquid nitrogen. Nothing came out of it, of course, except that bizarrely, we seem to have an opportunity right now in precisely that area. So you never know.
You never know. Once you've selected a new sector, I won't choose the one you've just picked, but oil and gas or pharma. How did you go about breaking into a new sector?
Yes, I mean, for sectors where you do not yet have a strong track record, it is very important to choose the right entry point. It may well be that your technology is better, perhaps much better than what is currently being used out there. However, that 10%, 20%, 30% improvement that you bring will be judged against the risk of adopting something new, the effort that will be needed to bring it in, not to mention other non-technical barriers such as existing commercial agreements and so on. So instead of arguing about incremental improvements over the incumbents, it may be much better to find applications or angles that are not addressed at all with existing technology. Again, theory aside, this is precisely what we did in the oil and gas sector with our advanced safety technology, in pharmaceuticals with our vision on systems-based pharmaceutics to integrate all aspects of product manufacturing and product performance. Once you do manage to get into a new sector, then it does become a lot easier to promote the use of your technology, even for the more mundane applications. So the entry point is very, very important.
PSE leveraged strategic partnerships to scale, including Siemens. How did you develop the partnership with Siemens, or how did that partnership develop over time?
Well, Siemens approached us a few years ago to collaborate with particular focus on bringing advanced modeling to real-time decision support systems. And we were very excited about this as it was completely aligned with our vision, which was exactly the same, to bring these very advanced, these very detailed, these very heavy models to real-time applications, plant control operations. We worked very hard with them, not necessarily reflecting this in real revenue, for about 2 years to test this idea and develop prototypes that could be demonstrated to the market. So these led to a formal partnership agreement that we signed in June 2018. Now, in the process, we got to learn a lot more about each other's products, our respective philosophies, but also to form very good working relationships between the key people in the two organizations. So last year, when we felt it was the right time for PSE to take the next step in its evolution to become part of a much bigger organization, it was quite natural for us to approach Siemens and for them to respond positively and actually quite quickly. And as I say, the rest is history. But so far, it has worked extremely well.
Ignoring the healthcare crisis, that's nothing to do with that relation. Costas, how important do you think the board is?
I think the board is central to the success or failure of any startup. I know, notwithstanding all the great technology and ideas that you may have, the board needs to keep the company's feet on the ground. Often the board needs to supplement some of the commercial, the financial, the sales knowledge and expertise that the management may not yet have. But of course, it also needs to do this in a way that doesn't kill the innovative spirit and the culture in the company. And this is indeed a tricky balance. And of course, I was very pleased to see that our board achieved this.
And moving on to some sort of general key learnings might be useful to pass on. What were the breakthrough moments, if I may call them that, in your journey?
Yes, well, I think bringing in the venture capital money in 2007, Close Ventures then became Albion, ventures was key. That was the point when we could afford to move away from fighting day fires and fighting for our day-to-day existence, as it were, to strategic thinking, the development of the products I mentioned before, and so on. And of course, the next stage in the evolution of the company was, of course, the Siemens acquisition last year.
What were the three things that you wish you would have known when you started out?
Yes, well, with hindsight, I realized there would be so many important things I didn't know when I started out that it's difficult to select three of them. As an academic entering the real world, the important thing is not necessarily what you don't know, is to be aware that there are many crucial things you don't know. To have this awareness, to be prepared to work hard to learn about these things you don't know, even if it moves you out of your comfort zone. And I think that would be the best advice I could offer anybody who wants to make a long-term commitment to getting a startup up and running and successful.
Is there one thing you'd do differently if you had your time again?
I think there would be many things. I mean, given what I said before, in terms of the things I didn't know, there would be many things I could have done differently. Again, I don't know how I would pick one of them. Again, my approach has always been proceed cautiously, but always with an open mind, and learn and adapt the strategy. Yeah, I think I found that having a strategy and just sticking to it blindly may not necessarily be the best approach for a startup.
And Costas, thank you hugely for your time today. I'm sure the listeners have found it very useful. And thank you also for the amazing return to our shareholders, which they're very grateful for.
Very good. I'm very pleased. Thank you.
Thank you.